Hi there, Paul McCartney here. I'd like to show you a short film that tells the story of how me, John, George and Ringo came together to record our last song. It's a single called Now and Then. We hope you enjoy it.
You want to fight? Well, all right. Whose father was it got the hole in the first place?
Boom, boom, boom.
Well, here we are. The final song by the Beatles has officially been released. The song is called Now and Then, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. First of all, thank you for being patient while I worked on this video. I know it can be tempting to be amongst the first to respond to such significant releases like Get Back and Now and Then, but I think moments like these deserve a bit more time and consideration to properly understand how we feel about them. Okay, so I don't want to go into the full history of Now and Then, basically because I already did that in a video from a few months ago, but also because the Beatles have already told this story better than anyone in a short film released on their YouTube channel that will perfectly get you up to speed on the history of Now and Then and why it's only just surfacing in 2023. I think you should go and watch the film, go and listen to the song if you somehow haven't already, and then come back here. But okay, to sum it up briefly, in 1977, John Lennon had been recording some at-home tape demos featuring piano and vocals which never surfaced in his lifetime. Then, during the Beatles anthology project in the mid-90s, Yoko Ono gave the tapes to the remaining Beatles to see if they could turn them into anything. From these sessions we got Free as a Bird and Real Love, which were the new Beatles songs released at the time. But Now and Then was too technically difficult to make a proper recording out of it.
We didn't have the technology to do the separation.
But a quarter of a century later, good old Peter Jackson came through with his machine learning software that was used on Get Back and removed the overbearing piano and electric hum from the Now and Then tape demo. And hallelujah, John Lennon's voice now sparkled in isolated clarity.
I know it's true. It's all because of you.
I should also note that it's a different lineup this time, with Jeff Lynne having no involvement with the process as he did for Anthology. Instead, for the first time ever on a Beatles track, it's Paul McCartney labelled as chief producer. I think it's also important to mention, now that Yoko Ono is 90 years old and has passed Lennon and Beatle legacy stuff to her son Sean, she also appears to have no active involvement with Now and Then. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but for now let's get back to the lead up of the release of Now and Then. Last week we received the aforementioned short film directed by Oliver Murray, which got me very excited, particularly when I clocked this never before seen footage from the anthology sessions receiving the Get Back visual restoration treatment. Side note, I really hope I can look as cool as George Harrison when I'm in my 50s, dear god. Anyway, all this was leading up to November 2nd, or where I live in Australia, November 3rd at 1 in the morning when Now and Then was released. I woke up on Friday and nervously went to go and listen to it, the final Beatles song, but I thought it'd be fun to do something I'd never done before and film myself listening to it for the first time, you know, like a react video. It turned out to be probably not the best idea. Yeah, I don't think I'd make it as a react channel because I filmed my reaction, but I kind of just sat there smiling the whole time. If you are desperate to see it, I've put it up on my Patreon, but I must warn you, it's very boring. It was such a bizarre thing where I was listening to this momentous song, this chapter closing on the legacy of the Beatles, and I'm just sitting in my little room on a weekday with my headphones on, and it just felt sort of strange. Did anyone else feel really strange listening to this song for the first time? It was extra bizarre for me because I had a camera in my face the whole time. So on top of everything else that was hitting me all at once, I also had this small part of me that was like, how am I coming across while I'm listening to it's just a bit weird. And then after the song finished, I knew I probably needed to say something, but I truly did not have any words. It's like at the end of a film, as soon as the credits roll and your friend turns to you and goes, so how many stars are you gonna give it? Like, we need time to process art. You know what I mean? Which is why, in typical Elliot Roberts fashion, this video has come out well after everyone else has released theirs. It all just felt kind of surreal, but I've been listening to this song in the days since, and Now and Then has really been hitting me in waves. Like, I didn't get very emotional about the first 2 or 3 times, but then I was listening to it whilst doing the dishes in the middle of the day, and I just started welling up. Like, I had to dramatically turn off the tap wearing rubber gloves. Like, that would have made a great reaction video. So here's the thing with Now and Then. When I listen to Now and Then, I feel like I'm listening to two different songs. One is Now and Then, and the other is the final Beatles song. What I mean is, it's hard to compartmentalize the idea of the first new Beatles song in several decades, which also happens to be the last Beatles song ever, and this is the first time you're going to listen to it. That's half of what's going on, and then the other half is, well, what do you think of this little 4-minute song? But now I've settled into the song, and I think it is both beautiful and haunting, both jarring and fitting. It is the bittersweet culmination of a beyond outstanding musical legacy. Let's go through it, shall we? Just like the beginning of I Saw Her Standing There, the very first track on the very first Beatle album,
1, 2, 3, 4!
we have Paul McCartney counting us in.
1, 2.
Then we hear a rather modern piano sound and the strumming of an acoustic guitar. Now, the piano was played by Paul in 2022, and he said he was attempting to replicate the piano from the original demo. I think he nails the playing, but the sound of it, like I said, is very modern. It's got that McCartney studio sound that you can hear on a recent song like Women and Wives off of his McCartney 3 album from 2020. If we're to go by the credits on Apple Music, the acoustic guitar that we're hearing is from George Harrison in 1995, which is just terrific that his presence is so clearly felt. Then we are met with the opening refrain sung solo by John Lennon, which reads, "I know it's true, it's all because of you, and if I make it through, it's all because of you." Immediately, these lyrics come across as simple but deeply moving, and matched with the minor chords that play underneath them, give the opening of the song a somber and reflective quality. This melody is very John Lennon, using multiple minor chords in a row and a peculiar progression later on in the chorus. I mean, regardless of anything else, this song moves in a fascinating direction that is very much John Lennon. Then, following the same melody as the refrain, the first verse comes in with the lyrics, "And now and then, if we must start again, well, we will know for sure that I will love you." On that last line, the "I will love you" bit, we hear Paul McCartney's vocal coming through, which I thought was a really sweet way to debut his voice on the track, for his first words on the song to be, "I will love you." This was also done this way because in the original demo, John kind of mumbled this line and so needed an extra voice to fill it in. So really a lovely way of fixing a technical mistake. In this same verse, we now hear the bass guitar, which was played by Paul in 2022, the same year that Ringo Starr laid down the drums, and I just want to take a moment to say, fuck yeah, we've got Ringo on the drums. I know it can be easy to take for granted Ringo's reliable, steady beat, but that beat, those iconic fills, are the backbone of the Beatles sound, and whether it's the 60s, 70s, 90s, or 2020s, Ringo Starr damn well shows up and nails it every time. God bless him. Joining the drum and bass are the strings, which were arranged lovingly not by the Beatles producer George Martin, who died in 2016, but by his son Giles. Giles is best known as the man in charge of providing the updated remixes of Beatles albums from the last few years. Here he says in Rolling Stone, quote, "I was basically ripping off my dad as much as possible. But listen, if I can't rip off my dad in a string arrangement for a Beatles record, when can I do it?" I would use a far more glowing term than ripping off and say that as much as Paul and Ringo have channeled the Beatles sound, so too has Giles channeled his father's irreplaceable orchestrated touch and delivered a stirring and passionate string arrangement that completely elevates the song. I'm sure George Martin would have been very proud. The song then lifts into the chorus, where we are met with the emotionally charged lyrics, "Now and then I miss you. Oh, now and then I want you to return to me, always to be there for me." And here's where we can detect some backing vocals. The one that sticks out to me most is what I would bet to be Paul McCartney from the mid-90s, singing uncharacteristically lower than Lennon's vocal line. Usually Paul would sing the high harmony in Beatles songs. And that was the first time I cried, when I was doing the dishes. Just the reality of John Lennon singing through time that he misses Paul and wants him to be there for him, and Paul singing the same plea back to John, it just hit me like a ton of bricks, man. Now, Paul may also be singing a higher harmony, and I believe I hear some modern day Ringo vocals in the lower register. It's kind of hard to tell. I'm doubtful that we're hearing George's vocals though. I think I have a pretty good ear for George's voice, and it's just not coming through for me. In the short film, Paul said that there were guitar parts from George that they used, but never said anything about vocals. And it makes me think that if George had lent his voice to this song, surely Paul would have mentioned that in the short film also. In the credits, we can see it says backing vocals for all 4 Beatles, including John, but that's actually a whole other thing. Giles Martin admitted that in order to have all 4 Beatles singing on the track, they sampled elements of the vocal harmonies from Eleanor Rigby, Here, There and Everywhere, and Because, which you can first hear towards the end of this initial chorus and then throughout the song. I love this choice. It's one of my favorite parts of any Beatles song are their voices harmonizing together, and I'm so glad it was included in Now and Then. This is, however, where we start to lose John's vocal a bit. But I want to set the record straight here. It's not that Paul and Giles have thrown too many things on top and gone too hard on the production. It's actually because in the original demo, in classic John fashion, when singing this part, he hasn't quite finished or doesn't quite remember the lyrics and kind of just slurs a few sounds together. But then he comes back in strong in the last line, which is why you can hear that right at the end of the chorus. During verse 2, we have a slight change of lyrics with, I know it's true, it's all because of you, and if you go away, I know you'll never stay. And during this verse, we hear a couple of little electric guitar flourishes, which I would hazard a bet is George in 95. It's all because of you. I know they're just simple little strums, but they have a very George feel to me. I really think it's him. And speaking of George, after the second chorus, we have what I believe to be the most fascinating and poetic moment of the whole song, and it doesn't even have anything to do with John Lennon. Paul McCartney plays a slide guitar solo that was inspired by the playing style of George Harrison, and do you know how much baggage there is attached to this guitar solo? Do you know how much history there is between Paul and George's guitar playing? Just to list a few moments, we have Paul McCartney playing the guitar solo on George's song Taxman from Revolver. Then, during the recording of Hey Jude, Paul McCartney vetoed George's lead guitar phrases that followed each vocal line, which George was not happy with. The tension from that disagreement bubbled up again during the Get Back sessions when George had a similar idea for the song Two of Us and was once again vetoed by McCartney. You know the bit I mean.
I don't mind, I'll play, whatever you want me to play. Or I won't play at all if you don't want me to play.
Harrison's lead guitar seemed to be a sore point for McCartney in later Beatle years, but after George had died, Paul was asked by Uncut magazine what some of his favourite songs are, and he chose, among others, Marwar Blues, George Harrison's beautiful instrumental slide guitar piece from his final solo album, Brainwashed. And now, after all these years, here's Paul McCartney paying tribute to George Harrison by delivering a gentle but fiercely evocative slide guitar solo, which is not something I think he's ever done to my knowledge. And this was the second time I cried. I was just so moved by the sheer weight of it all. And to say one more thing about this, even if Paul hadn't said that that was him playing the solo, I would have known it wasn't George, because as much as anyone, even another Beatle, can attempt to replicate that sound, there's no one else who has the soft touch of a George Harrison slide. The man's singular talent for letting his guitar speak for him was a gift of George and George alone, but even still, it's a stunning tribute. Jesus. During the guitar solo, we also have a magical lift from the strings that really stirs something in me. As do the backing vocals from the 1960s recordings. There's no lyrics here, but I think that this part before the final verse is the musical peak of Now and Then. Musically speaking, it's the most Beatles sounding moment to me. And we're met with that last verse from John and a final slide guitar accent from Paul before the song ends in that hauntingly beautiful way. And then I kept listening to the end of the song and something started sounding extremely familiar, like I've heard this ending on a Beatles track before. It took me a minute, but then I realized. See if you pick it up.
I've been away now, oh how I've been alone.
It's Wait, it's the ending of Wait from Rubber Soul. I don't know if that's a big deal, it's probably not, but now you will never be able to hear the end of Now and Then without also hearing the end of Wait. I'm telling you. Now, I also want to point out that in the original Lennon demo, there's an additional verse or bridge, which I'll give you a small sample of here.
I don't wanna lose you.
The lyrics read, I don't want to lose you, oh no no, abuse you or confuse you, oh no no, sweet darling, but if you have to go away, if you have to go, and then he kind of just trails off. And as much as this would have given the song an added dimension, I don't know if it necessarily would have been the best choice. I think without it, the song is more focused and clear, but I just thought you'd like to know what was left on the cutting room floor. But overall, what do I think of the song? Well, after spending a few days with it, I've really come to love Now and Then. There is a part of me that also wishes for a second version of the song, one that's more lo-fi with less production elements that would more equally match the sound of John's vocals. Because as incredible as they've made John's voice sound, there's still a noticeable chasm between the vintage recording quality of John's vocal and the modern production of the rest of the song. And I know to some, Now and Then was a huge letdown, whereas others are calling it a masterpiece. I think masterpiece is a strong word for this particular song, but if you think about how this track came together, using a demo from the 70s with added parts from the 90s, completed in the 2020s by using both cutting-edge technology and classic vocal samples from the 60s, the original era of the Beatles, I think with all that work, all that dedication of half a century, well, I suppose you could call this a masterpiece, at least from that perspective. But putting aside 50 years of hard work and sonic wizardry, I must say, on first listen, I thought Now and Then was lovely, but rather dour. Like it doesn't have any of those happier moments from other Lennon demos like Real Love. But upon subsequent listens, there is so much richness in that melancholy. It reflects the sad reality that John and George are no longer with us and aren't able to finish this song properly with Paul and Ringo. But much of that richness comes from Paul's total dedication to this song. Decades after it had been forgotten by everyone else, he knew there was still something there, and lo and behold, there was. But how could we ever doubt McCartney? After all, his greatest gift as Lennon's writing partner was to take a sad song and make it better. And that's exactly what he's done here. And going further, what Paul McCartney has done with Now and Then is also what he does every night when he plays on stage as he duets with John Lennon on I've Got a Feeling. He's communicating spiritually through music and through time with his old songwriting partner, and that's the true magic of Now and Then. And to drive this point further, perhaps further than it ever needed to be driven, we have the complete fever dream of a music video directed by none other than Peter Jackson himself. I mean, this part towards the beginning where they've made it look like Lennon and McCartney are singing I Will Love You to each other. That's evocative enough, but then we take an acid trip into some of the funniest shenanigans ever committed to tape.
I miss you.
Peter Jackson used samples from the outtakes of the Hello Goodbye promotional video, which includes some of my favorite footage of the Fab Four being total silly billies, and has then superimposed them into modern day Paul and Ringo singing the chorus filmed on an iPad. It's just a glorious mess. I mean, come on, they couldn't even get Ringo in the same room as Paul for crying out loud. While some may think this undermines the poignancy of the song, I think this is completely in keeping with the Beatles' sense of humour. They were a band who never sought to take themselves too seriously, and were the first to throw out a joke and have a laugh at their own expense. I still kinda can't believe that this exists. Like, it doesn't stop this video from being extremely weird and utterly bonkers, but In the same moving way that it begins, the video ends with us going way back to the Beatles as young boys, before the last frame of the band giving a final bow and slowly fading from view. But I want to go back to that image of John and Paul singing to each other. I think Yoko Ono not being involved with Now and Then almost gives permission for us all to believe that this song is about John to Paul. I know it may not be. In fact, Giles Martin has said, quote, "Obviously it hasn't been, but it sounds like John's written it for Paul now, in a very emotional way. It's a bittersweet song, which is very John, but with a combination of happiness and regret. It's like In My Life in that respect." So whoever John wrote this about, we'll never truly know. But for those McLennan dreamers out there, and for anyone who has cherished these two genius songwriters over the decades, I believe Now and Then is the perfect parting gift of Lennon-McCartney. Two souls who met as boys and connected through their shared love of rock and roll, who together and apart have blessed us with the most treasured and wonderful music ever recorded. And now one final time, they're letting us know that they love each other, they miss each other, and one day, down the long and winding road across the universe, they will return to each other.
It's all because of you.
Hey everyone, hope you liked the video. It's been a big week for Beatles fans, and I would love to know what you think of Now and Then. Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you're wondering, I will also be making a video on the Red and Blue albums, the remixed songs from those two iconic compilations. So if you're not subscribed, do hit that button so you'll be the first to see that video. If you want to see more Beatles videos, I have plenty on my Patreon where you can also join my Discord. But otherwise, have a lovely day. Go and listen to Now and Then. It's a good song, and I'll see you next time. Bye.